Yeah, great. So,
Okay. Okay, right. Thank you very much, Greg. So Dave Clasby, I am a regional partnership manager for Sustrans, which is a sustainable transport charity. We are best known for being the custodians of the National Cycle Network. So we build stuff, but we do a lot of behaviour change work as well. I live in Derby, but as I said, I cover the whole of the East Midlands. Predominantly, we focus on the urban centres, but we do have very good relationships with all of the counties as well. What I'm intending to do is just to give you a little bit of an overview of where we currently are in terms of what's happening regarding government policy and funding, because this is our moment. If you are into or interested in active travel, then this is our moment and we have to grasp it with both hands. I would say that, you know, I'm not going to touch on the impact on public transport, but unfortunately, part of the drive towards encouraging active travel, which we have seen from government, is because we have seen nationally a 90% reduction of usage of public transport. So whether that's buses or trains, and obviously there are huge issues about getting people back onto public transport. And the government recognises that. So what has happened is that in the middle of May, well, obviously with COVID-19, what we've seen with full lockdown is a huge amount of cars staying on the drive, staying outside people's houses. We've seen a huge increase in the number of people riding bikes because, as even Boris Johnson has said, suddenly the conditions were just right for people getting out on their bikes and actually taking their daily exercise through walking and cycling. So the first thing that came out was around on May the 23rd was guidance to local authorities, and they released announced £250 million emergency active travel fund. The first 25 was going to go through with a tranche 1, which was for immediate pop-up temporary interventions in our cities and towns. And that was going to be focused on things, well, the whole of the funding is based around reallocating road space. And just to give an overview, this is the most radical change from central government in a lifetime. Certainly in the 30+ years I have been campaigning and working on active travel, this is the most radical set of proposals. And last week they released, the Department for Transport released Changing Gears, which is their policy statement. It is a game changer. Okay, whatever you feel about the government on this particular issue, now there are holes in it, and I would hopefully expect Lisa to pick some of the holes in some of the policy, but on the whole, even I presume that she and I will probably be in agreement on this, it is a fundamental change in government. So emergency active travel fund, the local authorities have to, did somebody, sorry?
no,
okay.
I think it's all right. I think it's okay.
Okay, so basically money was available for emergency pop-ups. This Friday, this Friday, which is in 2 days' time, all local authorities are putting in for tranche 2 of the emergency active travel fund. To give you an idea, in Derby City, that is £800,000, and for Derbyshire, it's 1.7 million. Now, in terms of infrastructure, that doesn't go very far, but it's the direction of travel that we are working with. We have got the Department for Transport, and I have to say, the current Prime Minister on board with the need to push on active travel. Where the soft spot is with your local authorities, because they have to implement these changes. So they may well bid for the money, and there's going to be more money available. The Changing Gears and the policy statement that came out last week, and the new technical guidance on what you actually have to build, okay, if you want money, effectively, they are not interested in white lines being painted on the road anymore. You will not get money if that's what your plan is, okay? It has to be proper segregated infrastructure. So where are the challenges going to come? Where can we as activists and campaigners have an impact? Okay, so the challenge is going to be, because it's about road space reallocation, it's about removing the opportunity for people to drive on our streets. Okay, it's pop-up cycle lanes where you've got a dual carriageway. It's taking out one of those 2 lanes and making it into a cycle lane by putting in what's called light infrastructure or long-term permanent infrastructure. It is about taking out car parking spaces, and where we're seeing kickback is where you've got, for example, businesses that have car parking spaces directly outside their shop. Okay, and they're saying, hang on, that car parking space is for my customers. Well, there's so much research out there that shows that actually footfall increases when you pedestrianise and you remove cars, because shopping increasingly is becoming an experience for people. So that's where some of the pushback's going to come. Also, what we're looking at is school streets. So making the space outside of our schools easier for people to social distance by removing cars from outside of our primary schools and secondary schools. And there are various measures that you can use to do that. Where's the pushback going to come from that? Okay, well, it's about closing streets, it's about bus routes, etc. However, the biggest pushback at the moment seems to be coming from something called low traffic neighbourhoods. And the government has put forward this great idea about communities being able to remove rat runs and close roads, which is fantastic if your community has that social capital, okay, to be able to organise and to actually be able to deliver that. But where we are seeing low traffic neighbourhoods, and that would be a 1 kilometre square area of a town or city, and you would create it so that you can't drive through it. They've done it in Waltham Forest or Walthamstow, and they're also called mini Hollands. And what we're finding is that some people are going, yes, but I want to be able to drive to here, but you're saying I have to drive out of this 1 kilometre square, drive round it and drive in it. The argument is, well, no, you don't. You can actually walk now across, because we've removed a lot of the rat running and a lot of the vehicle movement within inside that 1 kilometre square. So low traffic neighbourhoods, what low traffic neighbourhoods do, and they're a fantastic thing, is they don't just displace traffic, they actually result in a modal shift. People leave the car at home because it's actually quicker and easier to walk and cycle to a short destination. So it's this idea of creating 20-minute neighbourhoods where everything that you need is within a 20-minute walk of where you are.
If you go about, yeah, you've slightly gone over, but yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. So the key things is to be aware of what your local authority, Derbyshire, and looking at school streets, low traffic neighbourhoods, pop-up cycle lanes, and keep the pressure on local councillors to actually deliver what central government has promised. Lisa may pick up on things around planning and other aspects, which is included in the new Changing Gears policy statement from last week. I would recommend you read it. Okay, I'll answer questions. Sorry, Greg.
Oh, no worries, that's fine. We'll bring Lisa in to kind of add to that, I think, and then yeah, like I said, we'll probably look at kind of doing all the questions and points and stuff at the end. Once all the speakers have contributed, but Lisa can now yeah, kind of add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I haven't prepared a presentation. I was just going to supplement a few things that Dave just mentioned. I would echo the comments about the government document that was issued last week. It really is brilliant. And to be honest, I can't pick any holes in it. I think the only thing I would say is the promise of 2 billion funding over 5 years really isn't adequate. I know it sounds a lot, but if you think about it, the government just announced 1 billion for a single road scheme last month. So, you know, 1 billion for one road scheme versus 2 billion for cycling schemes across the country over 5 years. and a single scheme can easily cost £1 million. The other thing I should say is the emergency active travel fund that Dave mentioned. I mean, that's really, COVID related. It's for addressing commuting traffic, people that can't take public transport. It's got to be delivered by March next year, which is very tight. So I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on the county council to try and deliver that. But as Dave said, there's more funding coming down the line, and the more pressure that comes from local areas, contact your local cycle campaign. If you haven't got a cycle campaign, set one up, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the council has only got so much capacity. They've got very limited staff, limited funding, and just to design and implement a single scheme takes a lot of time. So if you can give them ideas and sort of even designs for a route, that can help them and feed that in. And there is a cycle liaison group at the county level where all the cycle campaigns meet with the county council. Also going back to the talking about reallocation of road space, it's very contentious. Here in Chesterfield, the council closed several roads, including a single country back lane which goes to the hospital, providing for the very first time a safe cycle route for key workers to our hospital. And our Labour councillors and our Labour MP are opposing it because there wasn't consultation, even though it was an emergency measure. So that's the sort of type of opposition that's likely to crop up. So the more people that can speak up for cycling, the better. And just finally, a plug for school streets. This is a measure that's being pushed by the government, amazingly. I think the Derbyshire County Council is open to it. Lots of local authorities are implementing it now. And the government has also changed the policy to allow councils outside London the powers to enforce it using cameras, which they didn't have before. But in the 1970s, 90% of primary school children in this country walked to school on their own. And by 2010, that had dropped to 25%. And I bet it's even lower now. Parents won't let their children walk to school because they're afraid of their safety. And this isn't a sort of, immutable sort of, fact. In Germany, still 80% of kids walk to school on their own. We need to make our streets safe so that parents feel they're able to let their children walk to school. And although the survey's closed, Derbyshire County Council did have a parent survey asking parents how their children, used to travel to school and how they intend to travel to school in September. And I think if you've got school-age kids or grandkids and you think their school would be suitable to close the road outside the school, then please get in touch with DCC, because they're only going to go for the schools where there's support from parents and governors and heads. So I think that's really important. And just lastly, cycle infrastructure. Derbyshire is a great cycling, it's got great potential for cycling. There are some good leisure routes. There's little patches of good routes, but it's not joined up. But if we had decent cycling infrastructure, it should be possible to cycle from one end of the county to another with an e-bike really easily. So that starts to take lots of cars off the road. It's not just a leisure activity. It starts to become a real viable alternative to the car. So thank you.
Thanks for that. That was really useful. I just wondered if Delia is here on the phone. I'm not sure whether she joined on the phone.
Yes, Greg.
Oh, hi.
I couldn't get through the Zoom, so I had to quickly get my phone and dial in.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's great. So do you want to kind of come in on to talk about active travel then, and a bit more talk more about this kind of thing?
Yeah. So basically, I do the business engagement for our sustainable travel team, and we're working with the businesses obviously to promote cycling and any form of green travel. And we help them to sort of signpost them into have support for the suppliers that can actually help them get cycling projects off the ground or active travel projects. And linked to that, we have an active travel forum which I also attend. And the aim of that is to bring the private, statutory and voluntary organisations together. And it's an advocacy group, effectively, and the idea is that it can help to shape, I suppose, the policies and initiatives with regards to cycling that the council is looking at. And so I suppose it's difficult because we can raise lots of ideas, concerns and issues, but at the end of the day, the decision as to how much influence we have on any decisions that are made lies with the council. But it is a really good way of actually hearing what's going on out there and signposting to things that can actually benefit cycling infrastructure schemes, or really to spotlight concerns. And as the group is an advocacy group, it sometimes can really bring together thoughts and ideas that are representative of wider than the group that are there. So obviously I bring from the side of businesses, and we have other members that have really good contacts in the community. So there is a way for, I suppose, to hear of what's going on in the community as well as the businesses. And the Active Travel Forum is open to those stakeholders who feel that they can support the forum's aims and objectives in terms of, I suppose, helping to shape the way cycling provision in the city is developed and implemented. So I'm not quite sure what else you wanted me to say, but that's essentially two areas that I kind of work with quite a lot. The business engagement and the Active Travel Forum. So I don't know, is there more that you want me to say on that, Greg?
I don't know. If you'd like to, you've still got a couple of minutes left if you wanted to kind of cover anything else. Yeah, I don't know whether I wanted to ask Peter what his thoughts are on should we just move on to the A38 and then we can open it out after that.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, it's up to the meeting, really. I mean, somebody's posted a question about when we have questions. It does seem to make a little bit of sense to talk about questions of things that have risen so far for just a couple of 2-3 of them, and then to go on to the A38. Then we come back to questions. And
yeah.
So it does, because it does seem to be quite a good break point almost, before we change tack to the A38.
Yeah, definitely, exactly. So if you want to come in, if you've got any questions on specifically Active Travel and for Dave or for Lisa or for Delia, or if you put in hat.
And I see a couple of people have already put in hat.
Yeah, if you put hat in the chat box, we can look at that. And I know Steve Martin was sort of came in first on the hat, so maybe we could.
Okay,
get Steve in.
Greg, I can do that straight away. There's a consultation going on the highway code at the same time as all this policy. I'd like to hear what Dave and Lisa want to say about that and how perfect that consultation seems to be to them, or imperfect as the case may be. And the second part of my question is, there's a new inspectorate for active travel being raised. How effective is that going to be, and what's their term of reference? How far is that beginning to reach? Because how we legislate and how we control this active travel is going to be a very important part of the new policy regime. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Dave, do you want to come in?
Hang on, let me just, yes, that's good. I've actually just pulled up the changing gears on that last point. I've just pulled up the changing gears about Active Travel England. It's going to be very interesting with Active Travel England. I'll read out what the actual changing gears policy statement from last week says about it. Active Travel England will hold the budget for active travel. It will approve active travel schemes, inspect those schemes, deliver training, good practice knowledge, inspect highways authorities, and review major planning applications. Now, it's the last two that are absolutely fascinating, because with the reviewing of inspecting highways authorities, I'll actually read you what it says. In respect of sustainable travel outcomes, particularly walking and cycling, when considering funding allocations for local transport schemes, we will consult on introducing new criteria to measure local highway authorities' performance. And what they're effectively going to do is withhold funding for other transport schemes if they are not delivering on active travel. So you may not get your money for your road scheme if you are not delivering on what they expect you to be delivering on active travel. The other one is around reviewing major planning applications. And there is, now the devil is in the detail, and this gets a little bit, but Active Travel England are going to have the right to be able to look at major planning applications, but also to look at major developments, and also to ensure that other planning bodies, for example, district councils, or in a unitary authority like Derby, it sits with the unitary authority, but whether or not they are making provision for active travel. Now, the detail is whether or not that's active travel within the new development, or whether it's active travel connecting the new development to other parts of the network. What we don't want to do is end up with lots of little islands. So at the moment, I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic that Active Travel England is going to have quite a bit of, it's going to have quite a bit of weight behind it. As regards to the highway code, it's really important that people engage with changes to the highway code. Consultations do matter. They are taken account of. And in particular, I'm looking at safe or close passing. So basically making it a legal requirement for somebody to pass at 30 miles an hour, a minimum of 1.5 meters away from a cyclist. It would make a significant difference if that was to happen. So I would urge everybody to get behind those consultations. At least they might want to comment on Active Travel England.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. And I think I saw something from the charity called Living Streets. They put out some kind of guidance on the highway code stuff. So that was quite useful, I found. So I'll try and find the link somewhere, and I'll post it in the chat. Did Lisa or Delia want to come in on anything or add to that, or is everyone, are you both okay with that?
Yeah, just to echo, I mean, I think Active Travel England is a fantastic initiative, but it just depends on how much funding and resourcing and teeth they're actually given. You know, they could be a bit of a sort of toothless watchdog if we're not careful. But I think the principle is really good.
Yeah. Okay. Delia, do you have anything to say on Active Travel England, or?
No, nothing to add there.
Okay. So Dave Wells, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm having some problems with my internet, but firstly, just to agree with Dave about the central government and what seems to be a road to Damascus moment that we've had. You know, the guidance that they gave to local authorities over the Emergency Active Travel Fund was quite frankly amazing and really empowering of local authorities. I think if local authorities choose to take it on, I'm a Valley Borough councillor, and I've been lobbying Derbyshire County Council since mid-May for a school where I'm a councillor. And that some officers there at Derbyshire County Council, particularly in the Sustainable Travel Department, are really on to this. I don't know if you can still hear me. Yeah, they're really supportive of this, whereas some of the officers are, let's say, not as keen. The feedback that I've been given, has been more negative and sort of yes, but there's all sorts of problems with this sort of thing. So yeah, just to emphasise what Lisa said, lobby the Derbyshire County Councillors and make it clear what you want, because I think the easier you make it, the better. And lastly, I've put in the chat box a link to a recording of a webinar I attended last month, organised by ModeShift, who are the people that give accreditation to schools and businesses for their travel plans and things. And it was a really useful, I mean, it's 2 hours long, but it was a really useful webinar in that it introduced the concept of school streets, and then there were officers from various authorities throughout the country showing what they had done in their area. And yes, Dave, Waltham Forest, is absolutely brilliant what they've done, isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Peter, did you want to come in? I don't know if you put a hat or you put a hi in the chat. I don't know whether that was a hat meant to be a hat or whether that was just you saying hi. Yeah, that's fine. So I know Anne put something in the chat about some schools in Derby agreed to have walk and cycle to school days. Could that be extended by this new funding? Dave, do you have anything on that?
Well, the simple answer is not with this funding. No, this funding is purely infrastructure, so it's purely capital. So that would be behaviour change and revenue funding, and the Department for Transport's been very, very clear that they want to spend it on things that will materially change the status quo on our streets, tipping it in favour of walking and cycling, so pop-up cycle lanes, school streets, etc. I was going to say that if you want to people who are listening, and to Dave about the School Streets initiative, one thing you can do, and certainly a number of local authorities have looked at this, is to ask for what's called an experimental traffic regulation order. Okay, and what that can do is it can basically it will run for 18 months. And what it will do is you can make it so that it will exclude traffic from, let's say, 50 metres from the entrance of a primary school within a certain time period. The issue then becomes about enforcement, and the enforcement can occur in one of two ways. I think Lisa mentioned that they have now allowed us to use what's called number plate recognition software and cameras, but actually the other interesting aspect of the guidance that came out last week is that they're transferring for moving traffic offences that the police in the past have had to deal with, they're moving that across to local authorities, so it will be enforced by civil officers. So where you've got, and that could be, for example, traffic wardens, okay, or community enforcement officers, and they could enforce these exclusion zones around schools that have been put in place by experimental traffic regulation orders. It's a really, really simple and easy way of actually putting that in place.
Thanks for that. So we've got a few more hats to come in now. So Dave C, do you want to come back in?
No, that was it. That was the point I was going to make.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, Helen then. Helen, do you want to unmute yourself and come in?
I know how to do this. I've been doing this for ages. Right, I just got a quick question for Dave. So you were talking about the mini Hollands, the like 1 kilometre zones, and you said the request has to come from the community. So does that mean the actual area that wants that to happen, or how would you go about achieving that? Because I can imagine in the city, especially, there are some areas that are already really organised, have already got lots of community organisations, it'd be quite straightforward for them. But there are other areas that are maybe slightly less so. And so how would we go about supporting that? What do we need to do?
Helen, you've really hit something here that if there's a negative in all of this, it's Yeah, where you've got communities, and I think something I mentioned in my initial presentation is where you've got communities with social capital, okay, where you've got people who have got maybe influence within a local authority, who know people, you know, or I'll have a quiet chat with, or know the local councillors, etc. Or, for example, your ward is represented by a certain party who are not in power, okay, in county or city hall. So there are issues around that. It is possible to go and support communities to try to develop ideas around low traffic neighbourhoods. What I would say is it does have far much more political capital if it does come from people within that area. So I would look to try to find whether it's community groups in those areas, or possibly look at whether there are churches or faith-based groups in those areas. And faith-based groups can be really, really powerful. They can be very well organized. You know, so there may be other networks that can exist. So I would reach out to those and try and say, look, and what you sell it on is quality of life, improvement in air quality. It's the opportunity for, you know, like we all heard the birds singing, and reducing rat running. And
yeah, oh no, absolutely. I get all of that. But it's like you said, I mean, we both know there are parts of Derby where they're already organised, where they already put like street parties on, or
exactly,
got those things happening. And then there are other areas of the city where, for whatever reason, maybe they're more transigent in their population, maybe they're lower income.
Yeah,
those things aren't as not in place yet. But I think actually you've a thing on with faith communities, because that would be absolutely a group of people who are already quite active who could help out with that. So thank you very much. That's a really good idea.
Okay.
Great. I just wanted to. I know Steve and Dave have put a hat in the chat, but like I know they've already spoken. So I just wanted to make sure that because Alison also put a hat in, so maybe we could come to Alison before we bring those two back.
Yeah. Hi. Helen's really partly covered what I was going to say. From what Lisa said about squeaky wheels get the grease, and a comment that Lucy's put in the chat about inequality of the system. If people have to be shouting for themselves, that there could be a lot of areas in Derby who don't even know this is going on, maybe, or haven't got the time to work on it, or don't know the people to speak to, etc. So it's worrying that, for instance, one of the schemes that has already happened or been talked about is in Darley Abbey, which is, you know, one of the most affluent areas of the city. So what about the non-affluent areas of the city? How do they get their stuff done? Because they possibly don't have a voice, don't have the knowledge, or whatever. How do we make it equal?
Yeah, Dave, did you want to come in?
I'm only going to. I'll just make an observation. I'm not going to put any weight. I'm just going to say that the 2-point closures that Derby City Council put forward under their emergency active travel fund. One of them was in Spondon Village, which is the ward of the current leader of Derby City Council, and the other is in Darley Village, which is their #1 target ward.
Okay. Yeah. So does Steve want to come back in?
Yes, please. I don't want us to forget, I mean, Dave and Lisa have spoken about urban communities. We're living in a county which is highly devolved in terms of rural activity. My particular concern, as much as I agree with Dave about the distance of cars passing cyclists, is poor parking. cars and lorries and other vehicles that park in rather awkward and difficult positions for both the pedestrian and the cyclist. It does seem to me that the regulation has to take much more of an aggressive attack on that particular construction, both in rural and urban communities. Do you see any hope in that respect?
I don't know if Lisa wants to come in after me, but I live on a terrace street in a, as Helen said, a transient community in the middle of Derby, and there are times that yeah, my partner couldn't get her granddaughter's buggy out of our front door because there were cars parked so close on the pavement. It is a huge problem, and certainly in London it's illegal. You can't do it. That's the only part of the country where you, at the moment, and the government has been consulting on banning pavement parking across the country, and it would make a massive difference for people who are walking. And, you know, we do really need to bear that in, you know, people who want to, you know, everybody, most people can walk in some way or other. And this would be the single biggest, I think, intervention that could support people who can walk to walk around their local community. I know it's being consulted on. I know there's going to be some opposition to it. There certainly would be around here. It's the single one omission that I think is missing from changing gears. The other was the commitment to 20 mile an hour in residential areas. And really, that's something else that we should be pushing on, is to ensure that actually the priority in a residential community should always be 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, Lisa, did you want to say anything else? Or because I know Dave Wells was looking at coming in, but did you?
No, it's okay, go on, because I know you've got to leave space for the A38 discussion.
Yeah, well. I think we want to wrap this stuff up. So Dave, do you have a quick point before we move on to the A38?
It is just a quick one. Yeah, it's about the traffic regulation order that Dave mentioned. That is one of the things that the officer at Derbyshire County Council was you know, a bit obstructive about, that they need to be marshalled, they need to be monitored, a bit of obstruction, but that's not to say don't do it. I mean, what I've done is actually work directly with the school, and we're hoping to set up a school street, possibly without a TRO. So, you know, I think it can happen anyway. But it's a good idea to have a look at the webinar, the School Streets webinar, because they show how you can actually do that. So yeah, don't say no, don't take a no from Derbyshire County Council officers. You know, just keep badgering.
Can I just very quickly say, because I think we need to move on, and unless Lisa wants to come in on as well, but I mean, we've delivered quite a lot of school streets. It's you don't have to put barriers, movable barriers. If you put an experimental traffic regulation order in that basically excludes people, you put signs up saying that this is what's happening, you inform people, and then you have enforcement through civil enforcement officers or through cameras. Yes, you can, if you want to, put barriers up at certain times, you know, in the morning and in the afternoon as the school's starting and finishing. However, that is quite staff intensive. That puts a lot of pressure on school staff or maybe the local community. So our recommendation is not to necessarily go down that route. You can put in what are called coffin bollards, if the road allows it to, which is basically a metal plate which you remove, and there's a hinged bollard which you then lift up and you can then lock in place. You can lock it in place for an hour or for however long, and then when the restriction is come to an end, you get a lot of these in city centres where maybe before 10 o'clock you are allowing cars to go down a particular road. After 10 o'clock you can't, so they'll lift the bollard up and lock it in place. Relatively cheap. It's not like the pneumatic ones, so that's another potential option which certainly some schools have used in parts of the country.
That's great, thanks. Peter, do you want to come in? Yeah, Peter, do you want to come in now? I also know Jim.
Right.
Peter, I know that Jim was something to say on buses as well, but
That's exactly what I wanted to say, something on buses. So I'll leave most of that to Jim. But my point is actually the poorest people haven't got cars and they need to get into town or need to go to work one way or another, and they need a decent public transport system. And in all this schemas at the moment, our public transport system is being absolutely hammered. And if we want to get through to people, say in Normanton and Rosehill, which is one of the big problems of our campaigning, we need to think of that component as well. And also thinking about those areas and the geography, it's very, very hard to shut down Normanton Road. You know, no matter how much planners would like to do, because of the backlash it would be, you know, if say you pedestrianised it, because of the backlash that there would be from people who are trying to get in and out of Derby and the people in that area. But obviously, you know, in some respects, it'd be wonderful if we could. But Jim, please come in the public transport.
yeah, definitely. Jim, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, let me unmute myself. I'm the token passenger on Derby's strategic bus partnership, and there's been a meeting about a fortnight ago, so some of this comes from that. Firstly, if there's any delays with putting in some of these cycle lanes, it's because everybody and his dog wants to buy the relevant bits of equipment. But I believe the things are already happening in the city centre, and some of that is actually improving the bus lanes as well as room for cycling and walking, and hopefully getting rid of cars from in front of the council house. That's certainly supposed to be happening. How well it's going to be enforced, I don't yet know. As Peter says, buses are in a mess at the moment. The amount of services running has gone up to about 80% of what it was pre-COVID. Arriva said that they would have another increase in mid-August, but I've not seen any details yet. The big question that nobody knows is how schools are going to be served in September, whether schools are going to put on their own buses, which would be a problem to A, find them, and B, if kids already go to school on commercial services, then it may, and they stop travelling on existing commercial services, then it puts the finances of commercial services up the creek. Current loadings are about 40%. And after the government has spent 3 months saying, don't travel on public transport if you can possibly avoid it, that doesn't encourage people to come back. A lot of people are very nervous of the idea of travelling on public transport, and they are unfortunately more likely to go by car than they are by bike or walk. They might just walk round to the corner shop rather than go anywhere at all. But in the long run, that's not good for mental health and public activities. The other big problem with buses is that if everybody's gone on to buying things online and city centres decrease, the main use of public transport is to get people into city centres. And radial routes, you can connect from one radial route to another. But if the percentage of the number of people on buses drop by anything up to 20% in the long run, which is the big worry, then they are going to need a lot more funding. The current system just will not work. And so everything is still very much up in the air, but it's not particularly encouraging. And while it's nice to get everybody cycling and walking, there's a lot of journeys that you can't do by cycling and walking that you can do by public transport. And I've not been anywhere near a train since February, and I suspect that applies to many people, and I have no idea what's really happening to the railways, but it ain't good. I think that's all. Is there anything else you want to know, Peter, that I might know?
Public transport is such a critical issue
Yeah.
And I think there's a danger of us neglecting it. But, you know, it's too big a challenge almost.
Yes.
And also the demand has got to be from the climate movement is for public ownership of transport and integrated transport.
It certainly needs to be more integrated to get it to work better than it is at the moment. But it's just at the moment, it's the fact of the economy needs to pick up before anybody's travelling at all.
Yeah, I realised the time. Well, I realised the time we're on at the minute, and I know we really wanted to cover the A38, so I just want to give you know, the rest of the meeting to that, if that's all right. So may I, do you want to? I don't know if you want to come in now and now talk about this.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Not really sure where to start. So I live in Mackworth, very close to the A38, and I found out about the roadworks that were going to happen from Dave late last year, and many people in Derby from various sort of transport and climate groups got together and started a campaign to object to the A38 works. So we started by being involved with the planning inspectorate process, but that was quite frustrating. And we also designed some leaflets about the A38 works and delivered them through doors. And we set up a website. We've set up a petition aiming to trigger a debate at Derby City Council. And Extinction Rebellion Derby, which is part of the A38 campaign group, also held protests against the roadworks, and have been trying to highlight the trees that will be lost around Markeaton Park area because of this. And we've also been supporting Transport Action Network's legal challenge against the Department for Transport. So the A38 works are part of a 27.5 billion budget that is going to be spent on roads across England, I think. And this is called Road Investment Strategy 2. So the government published Road Investment Strategy 2 on the 11th of March with the budget. And they described it as England's largest ever road building programme. And Transport Action Network has decided to launch a judicial review of DFT's decision because it sort of flies in the face of the climate emergency, because road building has actually, I have an illustration, I might explain it better. I'm not very good at talking with words. But yeah, road building, so the land clearance from road building means that carbon sinks are lost. So that's demolishing trees and the soil being disturbed. And then there's the embodied carbon in the steel, concrete and asphalt to build roads. And then it also locks us into a transport system which is dependent on cars. So the A38 campaign started to stop the A38 works, but now we've decided that the best way to stop that is to try and stop the Road Investment Strategy 2 and persuade the government to not spend 27.5 billion on road building, especially when they've acknowledged the importance of active travel and sustainable transport, and they've declared a climate emergency. And they're also, the Department for Transport is looking into decarbonising transport in the UK. So it's very contradictory things. And if the road building does go ahead, it'll mean that we can't meet the climate targets that have been set out. So yeah, that's a brief summary of the A38. I'll post some links in the chat, which sort of refer to lots of things.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone, if you want to come in at all, you can put the word hat in the chat box and I can bring you in to talk about anything. You know, you can talk about the A38 if you want to, or you want to talk about more, anything else, then use the time, because we've got about another 15 minutes or so for this meeting. So let's kind of continue the discussion going. So Alison, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, Lisa might want to say something about this, but there is a consultation going on the decarbonising transport proposal by the government, and the consultation closes on the 31st of August. So it would be very good if lots of people would input to that and basically tell them that, more roads isn't the answer. That would be fantastic. You can find details about that, I think, on the Transport Action Network website, and probably Maya will put the link in the chat, I should imagine. Thanks.
Lisa, did you want to come in and say anything about that at all?
Yeah, just to reinforce what Maya and Alison have just said, it's not just 30 billion on RIS2, those are the Highways England scheme, but there are hundreds of road schemes that local authorities are proposing, and we've, through freedom of information, somebody's just obtained a list of all of these. And DfT are putting in 7 billion towards these local authority schemes. The local authorities are chipping in £1 billion as well. So our local authorities are borrowing money using developer contributions. They're selling off town halls at the same time that they're spending money on roads, which we don't need. Because the thing about roads is they don't even solve the problem they're designed for, which is to reduce congestion. They actually make congestion worse in the long run. So we absolutely have to oppose, funding for road building and get it diverted onto public transport and active travel.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So does anyone else want to come in? I haven't seen any other hats on the in the chat, but if you want to come in at all, it's a really good time to come in and talk about this. Yeah. So Brent, do you want to come in?
Hi guys, I'm wondering your thoughts on the Midland Connect proposals for the tram routes and what they're proposing to do as regard high-speed rail. I wonder how you feel. Have you had studied that? What's the response to that? I'm involved in fighting the A38. Sounds very familiar because I've got exactly the same arguments against HS2, and I've been fighting that fight, ironically, since I went to one of your meetings in 2014, where you'd pretty much decided you'd done your calculations that overall it doesn't work. They've remarketed themselves again, and they're now calling themselves the low carbon railway, even though it's going to take 120 years to be carbon neutral, but they're claiming environmental credentials. And certainly they're going to promote this, that the roads aren't the options. And that's where I'm caught in a quandary sometimes, because I get pro HS2 guys going, well, actually, what do you propose? And my solution is demand, actually. I agree, building more roads fills the roads up. You open more bridges, they get filled up. So I go to demand side solution. In other words, we need to look at reducing travel. We need to look at being more local in our travel. And we need to look at the drivers of why people commute long distances, and that is your house prices to your wage differential. Because I suspect, my instincts are telling me, with the number of green belts being built upon and the amount of house building schemes, and reading between the lines of all of these urban infill between Derby and Nottingham, your D2N2, your Midlands Connect and all those quangos have their eyes on all the land between Derby and Nottingham, and they just want to basically concrete that over. And you start reading between the lines and looking at all the different projects that's happening between Derby and Nottingham, it seems that's the way it's going, of which then you would build trams between, because you'd have a population that could support the tram network. So I think there's a definite, a big battle coming of whether we embrace the likes of the tram network, which is a good transport solution, but I do think they're trying to create a supply in order to get the demand rather than meeting the needs of the demand, if that makes sense. I think they're going to try and engineer a population shift to make their station and their tram system network viable in order to facilitate the destruction of the green belt between Derby and Nottingham, because I think the play is quite simply they want a combined authority between Derby and Nottingham. They want rid of Nottinghamshire County Council, Derbyshire County Council, and they want this grand cabal of the Midlands engine. Well, they come up with this stuff. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's just Quango Central. It is. It's just ridiculous. You know, the Midlands engine and all that. And this is, I think, the bigger game. And the A38 would form part of that strategy of, right, when we need this road, and that's the game they're playing at. And really, it's pork barrel politics, because it's about the councillors in the two cities, the bigwigs, trying to get their hands on central government funding in order to appease the large construction industries, the Balfour Bettys and the Vinci guys, who, you know, will add 20 years onto a project and add, I mean, the budget for A38 is what, 250 million? Add another 50, 100 million. It's meant to be, what, 4 years? I don't know, 4 years on. We've seen that with the A52. So, I mean, I just wonder what you guys think of all of them big plans, which I think the A38 falls under, for the whole Midlands Connect, the whole tram network, the whole HS2, all of these big projects, these big ticket projects that they're going to be building in the area.
Yeah, Lisa, did you want to come in and expand more, or Dave, you know, Lisa or Dave, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just to say, I agree with Brent about reducing travel being absolutely key. That's the first thing we should do. That's the, you know, it's the most cost-effective, most environmentally friendly thing we can do, is not travel, basically. So yes, you know, making services local, you know, yes, you know, rolling out, you know, fast broadband and, you know, remote working hubs, all of that kind of thing. I mean, hopefully, you know, COVID, you know, has sort of, you know, introduced people to the benefits of Zoom, and that will continue. But we also need traffic restraints as well to reinforce that. And I know it's not popular, but I think road pricing is absolutely key. There was a fantastic paper that Friends of the Earth Netherlands has just come out with, and they've modelled, you know, the impacts of road pricing, how that will reduce traffic, and they're proposing that will raise enough revenue. You know, it needs to go into local train travel, not necessarily sort of, you know, the mega projects, as well as bus travel. And it also provide enough revenue to provide a climate bonus for every household in the Netherlands, but higher bonuses for low income households. So, you know, everybody wins.
Yeah, do you want to come in, Dave?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, I'm very much in favour of public transport, and particularly electrified public transport. So trams in general are a very good thing, and they certainly carry a huge number of people in Nottingham. It's one of the reasons why it's consistently voted as one of the most connected cities in the UK. I'm always intrigued by the idea, and this is me being a public transport nerd, and Jim may pick up on this, but I'm a big fan of trolley buses. Because you don't actually need to dig the road up and put rails down. I know they don't have the same capacity, but effectively you can take a normal bus, take the petrol engine out, put an electric engine in, put a Pantechnicon on it, have the overhead cables, and then you've got a trolley bus. You've got an electric trolley bus. Very, very simple. And just one more thing to add about what Brent was saying about Derby and Nottingham are absolutely, they have a metro strategy. They are significantly working more and more closely together. And you've heard it here first, but the new city is going to be called Deng. It's going to be built predominantly, along with a lot of Chinese money, but it's DE and NG, Deng. You heard it here first. That's the new city, the next 21st century.
Oh dear.
Wow, incredible. Amazing, eh? So yeah, Steve, did you want to come in?
Well, how can I follow that? I really impressed. Thanks, Dave, for the tip-off. I shall add it to my my dictionary. I can get some of what Brent and others are saying. I think I'm more in line with Lisa. I do think there's going to be more emphasis on regionalism in transport issues. And I do think that's a much more systemic and system-wide approach to transport. We need it more than particularly for public transport, we need more of a systemic approach to it. And without a regional dimension to it, and I think more devolved responsibility for that regionalism from Westminster in particular, that's an important construct. So whilst I can understand Brent having a particular view of this, and I appreciate his comments, but I do think we do need a democracy that really represents the East Midlands and is not some subset and a minor subset from the Westminster bubble. And I do strongly advocate that we try to support a regional dimension to the transport system we have. And I would add to Dave's point, because I grew up in Nottingham and I remember the trolley buses there. Believe you me, I think the transport system in Nottingham is a very great asset, and it's a model that we should all wish to see more widely dispersed within the cities around, particularly the county of Derbyshire.
Yeah, okay. Jim, did you want to come in on anything? From so far.
Yes, thanks. I was just actually typing out that there are places abroad that are extending wiring, but there are others like Ghent where they've replaced trolley buses with battery buses. And I was just going to mention that Birmingham, I've seen a photo of a brand new electric double-decker which have been introduced, I think, a dozen on a route in Birmingham in the last few weeks. So that's probably the way to go. And also to say that Nottingham is, I think, the second highest public transport usage outside London, and the first one is Brighton, which is a rather special case. It's at least double of any of the PTE areas.
Mm. Yeah,
I have got those figures at home.
That's really good. Alison, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, it's something triggered one of my bugbears. Economic growth. The comment in the chat that the local councils are very keen on these transport initiatives and things, and lots of investment to create economic growth. How are we going to get local authorities and government and everybody away from continual economic growth? Because that's what's messing up the world. Sorry, I just had to say it.
It's certainly a big topic. Yeah. Does anyone else want to come in? Because we've got about five more minutes left of this meeting left. So, that now is your sort of like your chance of anything final that you want to say. So yeah, it's totally up to you if you want to come in. Or we can, or Peter, I don't know if Peter, you want to come back in.
I'm trying to keep quiet, but you asked me to come back in, I'll come back in. Firstly, I think we live in a Jekyll and Hyde society. So even government talks about the need to tackle climate change, but really in order to tackle climate change, we've got to reduce road transport by 40 to 60% by the year 2030. And there's no way that people are biting that particular bullet. And we have a major problem of getting through to the politicians about it. I think we still have a major problem with our councillors about it, and that's the thing that we can still talk about. But there's also, and in parallel to this, our council is caught up, remember, I'm talking in personal capacity now, our council is caught up in the problem of COVID, and it nearly airbrushed climate out of the scene. We've had a major battle to get climate back onto the scene, and now climate is one of the 3 strands of the COVID recovery, which is all very great, but the climate crisis is 100 times bigger than the COVID recovery, if you know what I mean, because we might recover from COVID one way or another, but if we don't tackle those climate issues in the next few years, we really have had it. we may have had it anyway, but we won't go down that depressing route, and my glass of wine is empty. So so it's really the importance of somehow either finding ways of engaging people on climate, and we all know that it's not easy. You can't always be upfront with our placards saying the end of the world is now. We've got to find other ways and means of doing it, using those audiences and ways. Greg, for example, has done quite a lot around plastics, and it's opened up the discussion about climate and so on. So we've got to find ways as a group of doing that. One other thing, in terms of Derbyshire Climate Coalition, the piece of news, I haven't consulted with colleagues about this, but I'm setting up a meeting with what's his name, the professor from the United States on the United Nations climate talks. The one who stood as a Lib Dem candidate in South, so looking at the climate talks, and I'm asking somebody from the Climate Coalition to talk about that. And I've got that date set up in the middle of October. And if you want to be, once again, if you want to be involved, please make sure we've got your email addresses. The United Nations talks.
Isn't it?
Sorry? Felix. Exactly. So my age is getting to me, so, and you. So Felix, and we've got the Secretary of the National Campaign Against Climate Change, who they've got a long record of organising outside United Nations talks and lobbies, marches and everything like that. They will both be talking, I think the date is October the 17th, but I'm just telling you that that's another angle. Maybe it's not as close to home, but nevertheless, we can't forget the ways of putting pressure upon and trying to articulate those particular issues. Anyway, that's so. Thank you for letting me rabbit on again, Greg.
No worries. No, it's fine. But it's really great for everyone to join us here. I don't know if anyone wants to any final points anyone wants to say. I know Delia hasn't said too much. I don't know if but we won't put the pressure on. But obviously it's great that everyone we've had this conversation. Did you want to say anything, Delia? Final words?
No, it's my first time to the group, so just trying to capture the dynamics. Obviously, lots of passion and enthusiasm, and obviously agree with a lot of the comments made, especially by Dave, simply because I've worked with Dave before and echo many of his thoughts. So as far as the Active Travel Coalition goes, nothing more to add on that because it's very straightforward. But lots to take away.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for So it's obviously it's great for everyone to come on here and talk about this issue. We'll save this recording. We'll put it on the YouTube channel so that we can anyone who's missed it can go back to it. We've got we've got our email lists, our Google groups that we can kind of use to kind of continue this discussion. That's one of the good things about this through the Derby and Derbyshire Climate Coalition is that we've got our Google groups to continue this kind of discussion if we want to. That's what the Google groups are there to set up for, to have discussions around these kind of issues. So one thing that was really good was that I know we had the Derbyshire Climate Coalition meeting on food, and then as a result of the meeting, we had the Derbyshire Food Growing Network set up, which was really great by Kay, and it was a really good example of a response to a meeting that we held on the issues of food and this kind of thing. So, and that was really great. So I think it would be really good to stay in touch with a lot of people who have joined the call today, and we can kind of continue this discussion, because I think as Dave mentioned right at the beginning, this is a real critical time to kind of push on this issue of transport and trying to push for this is our real opportunity. So I think it's just about staying in touch with each other and just trying to keep pushing. We'll save we'll save the chat as well, and we'll send it round on the email. If you're not on the email address, you can leave your email in the chat and we can add you as well. But we will be ending the meeting. But like I said, doesn't have to be the end of the conversation on this. So thanks so much for coming, everyone, and it's been really good to see you. And I hope we can use this really good opportunity to push for a lot, use this funding opportunity to really push for change, and let's hope we can get something really solid out of this. So thanks a lot for joining, everyone, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Greg.